to you with the final What I Would Have Done episode for now. I'm not sure if I'm going to continue this segment or not. We'll see what happens. But I figured, why not end on something that a lot of people are fairly familiar with, and a lot of people seem, I guess, a little enraged over or have a strong, passionate hatred for. And this doesn't go for everybody, obviously. I think there's some people who actually do like these movies. However, me personally, I've not seen actually the original series, in particular the Star Wars series, which I'll be discussing, which again you can see from the title. I've not seen them. I still need to see them and watch them fully. But despite that, I think even with my lack of knowledge as to really what the Star Wars franchise is mostly about as far as plot-wise or character-wise is concerned. I mean, I do know the basics, but I just don't know, obviously, like, the little details and things of such, because I haven't fully seen the movies. But I'm looking at this through a perspective of somebody who's only seen the prequels. And yes, I grew up during the time the prequels came out. And I didn't really grow up during the era of when the original Star Wars franchise came out, so I really wasn't aware a lot of Star Wars, and the only thing that kept me from knowing about the series was the fact that there was these prequels, and I have seen all three prequels. I think a lot of people have come back with, I guess, fairly unpleasant memories with them. For me personally, when I watched them a while back in like middle school, around when they came out, or around even earlier elementary school, I didn't really understand them fully, and I just thought that the whole world that they sort of set up with Star Wars was interesting. I mean, now that I'm looking at it through a more adult perspective, I can only totally understand why people criticize these prequels. I think it's there's a lot of criticism to go around about them, and I totally understand if people feel the exact opposite way and feel that these prequels really did offer something to the franchise, even though I'm not sure how many people out there think like that. But if you do, then great, more than happy for you. For me personally, now looking at it from an adult perspective, I can say that there's a lot of things that I would have changed personally. And that's what this video is intended to discuss. And for the majority, I feel that a lot of what ended up happening in the prequels were just kind of more of a visual treat for me when I was younger, even though I had really no idea what was going on. And even now, I think it's even hard for people to sort of understand what's actually going on in the prequels, because there's just a lot of mishmashing everywhere. But I think overall, my opinion just sort of stands as, I think it is a mediocre series. Do I think it's so bad? I don't know. It's kind of hard to say. I mean, I think the fact that the script was just so weak, and the fact that everything was just so out there, I think I would put this actually kind of lower than maybe something on the lines of the reviews that I've done beforehand, and I'd probably put it under the same level as kind of Twilight, because again, I think the script just really damages these prequels really badly. So it's kind of hard for me to kind of fully take in every single little aspect of the prequels. This video isn't intended to be that long, and it's more intended to just give you a short snippet to the basics that kind of existed through all of the three movies, episodes 1, 2, and 3. And kind of go into what I would have done. And this is, again, all opinion based. This is not designed to be a I'm right, you're wrong video. It's just intended to express my open and honest opinion and what I would have done with these prequels had I been in the director's chair, had I been in George Lucas's position, because pretty much from what I could tell, it seemed like that the prequels were all pretty much based on Lucas's ideas and Lucas's direction. So yeah, I think that just kind of goes to show for something. But either way, what can you do? In the end, they're just movies, and all movies are flawed, but I still think that ultimately there could have been a lot of improvements within this one, and I thought it'd be interesting to discuss them, especially since it's probably one of the more common ones people like kind of ranting over. So I think the most important thing that really was an issue, and I think a lot of the issues of the movies that I've done, actually with the What I've Done videos in the past, is the characters. And it's not so much that they're not likable, it's just they're not interesting at all. They just don't offer really anything to the table. I mean, it's just, I just don't understand, because the dialogue and the way they say everything is so monotone. It's like wah teacher from Charlie Brown. It's just the way they talk to one another is just so emotionless and so lifeless that it's really hard for me as a viewer to get into it, because oh my gosh, they just express everything so dully, without emitting any kind of emotion, that it's so hard to get a real character out of the characters. And I'm thinking, on the one hand, you want to sort of say that the actors should have tried harder. And I think that is true. I think the actors could have put in a little bit more effort. I felt Ewan McGregor was, I think, for the most part, trying. I mean, I still felt a little bit more emotion come out of him than everybody else for the most part. But even though there are bits where they do kind of express an emotion, like, I mean, there are points where Anakin does feel angry and where Palpatine looks evil. But you don't really get that through the whole entire 3-part trilogy. You just only get it in certain bits and scenes where they have to, okay, this is a big scene, so you have to act emotional. And then they'll just go back into being completely monotone and completely boring and dull. So, really, I think that's the problem, first and foremost, was the characters. And I like kind of comparing it to the last ones that I did, in that it's not like Twilight, because with Twilight I think it's more of a likability factor with the characters, because I just don't think a lot of the characters have anything that's likable about them. Yeah, they're boring to a certain extent, but they're not really likable or approachable. It's not that these characters can't be likable, it's just they're not interesting, and they feel fairly cookie cutter cardboard cutouts of characters and not actual characters. And when you have that in a trilogy, you are in for some fairly long nights trying to get through these movies, because these movies run at least 2 hours for sure, and then having to deal with the dialogue and just how slow it moves when they're talking. It doesn't offer anything unique to the table. And I felt like a lot of the dialogue scenes were fairly drawn out to the point where it's just so hard for me to sit and really get invested. And I think even I had problems with this when I was younger. I always wanted to go, okay, when is there gonna be like an action scene or something, because this is just so slow. And I think in particular it's not only just the characters that are just in the background, but these are like the main characters too. Padme, completely lifeless. Anakin, completely lifeless, although he does have this kind of a tragic backstory. It's really hard because it seems like Lucas doesn't know how to make a character so that we can sympathize with him, because he just does such horrendous things and expects us to somehow like him. And it's interesting too, because even when Anakin's telling this to Padme, she's all cool and chill with it in the second movie, and then in the third movie she's all like, "You killed younglings? Like, what did you do that for?" You know? And then he kills a bunch of people in the second movie. I don't understand. I really don't understand that concept, and it's hard to understand the characters, because the characters just feel so like just nothing there, and just no depth. And when you don't have characters that have depth, it makes the movie drag for a long time. A long time. Unbelievably long. So, really, they needed to make the characters more lifelike, and they needed to give these characters personality, and they were more than capable of doing that, and Lucas just did not bring that to the table, and it really, I think, ended up making the prequel suffer really bad, because when you don't have the characters to carry you through Star Wars, you don't really have a movie necessarily, because Star Wars is basically based off of characters, and really it's supposed to bring the characters all within full circle, because again we have Anakin's kind of backstory, which I think from looking at the older Star Wars movies would have been a fairly fascinating prequel series to get into, but just Lucas's execution of the characters just made it so hard to find anything likable, anything interesting. So I think that was just a major issue that I had with it. And even back when I was in elementary school, I was kind of going, you know, these relationships and these characters, it's just go back to seeing spaceships and showing us the pretty world. That's all I care about. But again, I was fairly young back then, so I really did not understand what was going on for the majority of the film. So plot didn't really, and characters really didn't matter to me back then. But now that I'm more of an adult and I can understand these things more and comprehend them fully, then yes, I fully see it through, that these characters really don't offer that much to the entire franchise as a whole. And it was really important though to make these characters likable, because you have, you know, the mom of the two kids of Leia and Luke. You have to make this character dynamic. You have to make this character interesting, because it leads up to so much more. And to have a prequel series not do that, I think just gravely disappointed people, and just made people roll their eyes and kind of walk away in shame, you know. And I think that's fairly understandable, but in a way it's sad, because you go, oh, wouldn't it have been nice had they done this, or if they'd done that, or if they went into that direction, or just gave this character something interesting to invest into. So, really, in a nutshell, I think the characters, for the most part, are one of the weakest aspects as a whole. One of the weakest aspects. The characters. And with these characters, there comes a story. Now, the story from from just trying to watch reviews and get people's ideas and things and research, oh my gosh, it's so hard to understand the whole plots of all three movies, really. I mean, some points I just get so lost and confused that I don't even know what's going on anymore. I just completely give up. My brain will just not let me comprehend it. So, really, the story needed a total reworking. Like from the first movie on to the third, total rework, rewrite, just rewrite the entire stories, because all of these stories just don't amount to anything, really. Anything. And it's a bummer. It's such a bummer. And the reason why is because the story doesn't really revolve so much around the characters. Like, we don't get to see Obi-Wan and Anakin really interact until the second movie. And even then, we don't get to see their Anakin's kind of journey into becoming a Jedi. Because isn't that the whole point? Like, it's supposed to be about his journey to becoming something great, and then within that greatness, he falls to the dark side. I mean, why is there this need to put in things that aren't so interesting when you could focus on more things that are more interesting, like actually giving these characters depth, and in particular with Anakin as well as Obi-Wan. I don't understand why Lucas didn't focus in on that, and kind of make it seem like it was taking a similar approach to the fourth, fifth, and sixth movies. Now, that doesn't mean that he had to copy them. No, he could have given them a totally different range and totally different struggles and different obstacles and different paths. There could have been a lot more added in there to make it fairly different than the way the fourth and the fifth and the sixth movies were structured. I think that would have been totally possible, but it just seemed like that he chose to focus in on creating this kind of complex plot when he really didn't need to so much. Especially if he's going for the demographic of younger audiences, it would have made sense had they focused more in on characters and focused more in on sort of absorbing us into the world of Star Wars and such, which I think it does with the visuals. But again, it is kind of a gag with the visuals. But I'll get into that later. But it does seem like that the story just ends up falling apart, because everything within the story just is so overly complex and unnecessarily complex that it leads to plot holes, and it leads to the audience just being confused. I mean, I think even a regular going audience would probably just be annoyed at how hard this movie is to understand, because you just don't know what's going on, because you don't end up really caring, and that has to do with the characters again as well. So yeah, the story just needed a total rewrite, a total rework. In particular, the script, especially with the dialogue, because the dialogue is, oh my gosh, the dialogue is it's the dialogue is it's pretty hilarious to watch the dialogue unfold, because you could just tell that even the actors just did not know how to get these lines out there and make it sound fairly genuine or unique, because I just don't think they had a lot to work with. And again, I think they fall into that same similar Twilight category where the actors couldn't portray just normal characters because they weren't really given a lot of material to work with. And I think really this falls under the fact that the script was just so badly shaped that it was just so hard to it was just, I mean, I know Star Wars, it is a fairly hard, I mean, this project must have been very hard. I mean, I can tell that this is making a prequel series to Star Wars is not the easiest task in the world. And are there going to be flaws along the way? Absolutely. But to have it be so low like this when he had sort of this other good material to work with, and look into the previous films that he made and see what made them so strong, you know, it really would have, I think, helped a lot. But I really think he did not look into his original series, and Lucas just left it on the side and decided, okay, I'm gonna totally go for a new, completely different direction. But the problem is you can't almost do that unless you want somehow these older movies as well as these newer movies to somehow connect, and they don't feel towards the end so connected, even though it does close with the with the babies being separated. It does feel though that the journey though to get there was just so just half baked that it just didn't go anywhere. And it's just depressing, because you know that there could have been some potential there, but no, it was just routed by the script and story and characters. But I think if they definitely had stuck to a plot that focused in more on the characters, in particular with Obi-Wan and Anakin, because they are really at the forefront of this prequels franchise, then they should have had a whole training session, a whole getting into the Force. We could actually get more of a sense of the Force and aspects of things that were not explained maybe in the first 4 movies. You know, first 4, 5, and 6. Yeah, it's just weird how these prequels work. But again, I think had they stuck to that kind of more of a plot, instead of trying to cram in all of this stuff that's really not all that interesting. Like literally, if you listen to the plot on the first movie, you'll see how it's about taxes and trade. Like literally in the beginning, it's just dealing with that kind of stuff, and you go, where did he get this idea from? It's just it just feels fairly like, oh, I'm just gonna pull this right out of my buttocks here and see if it works, you know. And it's just, oh my gosh, just it's depressing. It's depressing. Now, another thing that I wanted to briefly discuss that kind of has to do with the characters is the love story between Anakin and Padme, which is also at the forefront of this movie. Or these 3 movies. So what you have to understand is that you got Obi-Wan and Anakin, and then you got Anakin and Padme. Now, Anakin and Padme's relationship, the problem being is that these characters are just not interesting. There's nothing that speaks chemistry, or that speaks, you know, that speaks love. It's just not there. You just don't feel it at all. And this is kind of depressing, especially when, you know, you're setting up for, again, the 4th, the 5th, and the 6th movie. You know, especially when literally that's what Anakin ends up sacrificing for in the 3rd movie, which you will see if you watch the 3rd movie. It's literally about him sacrificing, you know, for Padme, which is, again, I think the whole concept of, you know, like with love and hate and those kinds of emotions, I think it was going in that kind of positive direction as compared to the first two, which really, the first two movies really felt like filler until we lead up to the final film. And it seemed like the third one was trying to deal with complex things. It just didn't know how to juggle them. And ultimately, the problem is we have to have a build-up and an understanding of the characters. And the problem is that we don't. And it's hard to get invested into Anakin's love life when his love life is not interesting and it's not engaging, and you don't feel like that they like each other. Because for the most part, it does feel like two pretty people. You know, it feels like that the pretty model couple that you see in, you know, in magazines. You feel like it's so superficial. Especially with all of the backgrounds they make, and they make it look all paradisey and stuff. I mean, I actually like those backgrounds because they're just so nice and pleasant to look at, but at the same time I'm going, okay, back to the characters now. Can we get into the characters? Okay, yes, I see the prettiness, and yeah, you're trying to make this pretty, you know, exotic atmosphere, but can you just please give us some dialogue here? You know, that actually works. I also think the issue dealing with Anakin's character in particular is just the fact that they don't make him seem to have a change gradually into evil. I mean, the first movie we barely get anything of Anakin, so you can almost scrap the first movie. But in the second one, you do get a sense of him, and he really does seem rather, you know, corrupted sort of to begin with. And it just kind of comes off as so out of the blue, and there's no lead up into him becoming corrupted until we get into the third movie, really. So it seems like, especially when he's talking with Padme too, and then he talks about, you know, government and politics in that one scene where they're behind the pretty waterfall, and again, that waterfall is so distracting. But they're talking about these issues, and he literally brings up these whole concepts of, you know, sort of being a little bit more on the dictatorish side. And this is not really a good idea to have your main protagonist do this, because it just sucks kind of the likability out of him, because we don't know what ultimately changes him into making him think in these ways. Until we get to the point of where, you know, his mom gets killed and such. I think those aspects actually were good, and I think worked to the movie's advantage. But when it's just clouded with Anakin at the beginning being so snobbish and so just kind of almost to the point where he is a little unlikable, it just makes it hard to sympathize with him when bad stuff does end up happening to him. Especially when we don't really get a lot of time with him and his mom. Again, his mom is only there in like a few scenes. And his relationship with Padme is so weak too. So that's really what's the problem, I think, for the most part. It's just with his characters, there's aspects to it that are just fairly unlikable, and then there's not a whole lot there that you don't really feel anything ultimately for anybody in the entire time you're watching these prequels. So that's really what they needed to do. They needed to make the love feel more genuine. They needed to make the love feel more unique, and then they could have, I think, rolled well with this plot point and him dealing with love and hate and dealing with the inability to cope with loss. I think that would have totally worked well, but just being executed around all of these other things, and making him already seem off the bat like an arrogant um, an arrogant, selfish boy, it's hard to really get behind him. You don't really feel like he's a man throughout this, and you don't feel like he's grown as a character at all. I feel like Anakin is pretty much the same throughout the second and the third movie, because again, in the first movie he barely gets any time, and he's only a boy, and you don't really get a sense of his character so much until the second and third. And it's really only then that you realize that, wow, he's just kind of douchey, and he is kind of, he just came off as fairly douchey to begin with to me. And they really needed to fix that, I think, in order for me to get behind what he was going through. And I feel like they needed to make more development with his mom and with Padme to the point where it feels genuine. I just feel like the character interactions should have been a lot more genuine, and then the messages could have gotten across to the audience more effectively. Now, as far as the last thing that I wanted to discuss has to deal with continuity. When you're dealing with a prequels franchise, you really need to make sure that everything is at a point where it feels like you could just look and see how everything ultimately connects. And the problem is that these movies, the first, second, and third don't feel like the fourth, fifth, and sixth. And when you don't have this kind of continuity within them, now that's not saying that you can't change certain aspects within the prequels to make them stand out on their own. No, but you have to keep a certain level of consistency with the original series. And it seems like a lot of the bits within the prequels movies didn't do that. And instead they went into this fairly market-type-esque approach. And you'll kind of see this through the visuals. Which is also the other thing I kind of wanted to suggest, what goes along with continuity. The visual style is completely different than the first four, which, again, I don't think that's an issue, really, that I have personally. I don't think that that's a problem if they want to make it feel different. But at the same time, we kind of have to feel like it's the same world. It's the same world of Star Wars, and I really think that the prequels sort of struggled with this aspect, and they really tried to make it visually eye candy, and a lot of it is really visual eye candy. Sort of similar in a way of what I reviewed with Avatar, in that it is really trying to up these visuals. And the problem is that there's no build up to these visuals, and nobody really cares as to what's going on, because we haven't gotten a sense of really what's going on, because we'll just open with an action sequence, and we don't really understand how and why, and we don't really care. And I think that's just an issue, because it seems like that a lot of what the prequels open up with is just something that's more intended to be visually entertaining, but not provide you any sense of depth or understanding of the scope of certain situations. And I think that's really what makes the movie drag down as well, just because of these visuals. And it's not that George Lucas couldn't put any cool visuals in there. I mean, I'm sure I'm totally for visuals. I don't mind if they're computer or not. I mean, I really prefer hand-drawn animation for cartoons, but when it comes to live action, I mean, I don't mind if they use a green screen or something like that. And films can use green screen and use them fairly effectively. Problem is that this film doesn't really do that, because the green screen doesn't really serve a purpose in that it's just trying to show you visual things, and it's just trying to be marketable to the younger kids and get younger kids involved in Star Wars, because literally Lucas had to appeal to this kind of younger generation. And I think he totally could have done that had he given Anakin a lot more to work with in the first movie. And a lot more to do in the first movie, too. Even though you do get certain aspects, I thought, like, him making the robot was rather unique and interesting, and having him being intelligent in sort of that hands-on way. And I think even at one point he says, I like fixing things. And I think that gives a little bit of insight to the character, because, he likes to fix things. He doesn't want, he doesn't like problems, he doesn't like conflicts, which is actually a lot of how I am. But at the same time, I think there is some depth there, but it's just clouded with all of this other stuff that is so useless that it doesn't get down to what good potential it could have had. And I think that's why a lot of people end up being disappointed by it. They think to themselves, gosh darn it, it could have been so good, but no, it wasn't. But again, this is just my personal opinion. I mean, coming out and looking at them again, and really taking in what people have to say, I think this is really the main things that I could come up with that I thought were really a problem within all three movies. Now, it's just not one movie that has this problem, but all three of them have these problems. I think all of these problems are really, really there within the movies. So I think it's really important that people just kind of look into these things, because, I mean, I didn't really read into these things when I was younger, and now that I look at them and I'm older, I go, whoa, wow, why didn't I see how odd and how out of place and how monotone and dull it was. But yes, just to highlight the most important changes: characters, make them lifelike, make them dull, make them human, make them interesting, likable. Story, have it focus more on the characters, in particular Anakin and Obi-Wan, because they're the ones that really end up really influencing what ends up happening within all three movies, and they're the ones that should be the forefront, and they should be the ones that we develop strong bonds with and connections with, as well as Padme, who ends up bearing the two kids. So that's important too. Focus less on visuals and let the acting and the scenes and dialogue and character development express itself, and maybe use simpler visuals in order to just enhance an idea or a concept. Make the love story genuine, again, giving the characters more range to work with, in particular Padme and Anakin, so that we can sympathize and understand their relationship. Bring continuity back within the entire franchise and make sure that the whole franchise is sort of consistent with itself, while at the same time maintaining a certain level of uniqueness that can make it seem like a genuine take on what happened to Anakin as a character. And also the script, in particular the dialogue, really what drags this movie down to a whole new low, and really is what makes the characters fairly lifeless. And I think the reason why the actors didn't put in a lot of effort was because of the fact that they were just dealing with this kind of a script. And when you bring actors in with this kind of a script, they're obviously not going to put in their best forefront, because they have nothing really to work with. And I think really the dialogue is to blame for this. But again, I think there could have been, I think, more effort too on the actors and actresses' parts, to try to bring some life to even a lifeless script. But again, it's kind of a both. I think both are to sort of blame for that. The script for being bad and for the actors not trying, even within bad circumstances. Because I think even within bad circumstances, that shouldn't give you an excuse not to try and put in some effort. So really, I think that's ultimately all that I can say about the prequels. I thought this would be an interesting note to end on. I'm not sure if I can continue this series or not, because I'm not sure what other films I could look into, but I'd be more than happy to hear anybody's suggestions, questions, comments, concerns. But again, this is all just my opinion. I totally understand if there's others that have different opinions, and I'd be more than happy to hear anybody's opinions regarding anything that I've said. And I totally understand if you find these prequels to be sacred and the best in the world, but I felt like that they had some issues, and within those issues I felt that that the things that I suggested would have been what I would have done had I been in George Lucas's position. But I really think that's all I can say about them. Again, any questions, comments, concerns, more than happy to answer them, and until next time, everybody. Bye-bye.